Today's witness is called Zeke. He is in his middle 50s, powerfully built and weather-beaten, deep-set, rather humorous eyes, grizzled hair, big eyebrows, a deep, slightly hoarse voice, a cheerful man. Zeke will bear witness to a rich man's tomb given to a poor man and sealed up and strongly guarded. It was an odd feeling, you know, to change jobs so late in life after so many years. Very different jobs indeed, although still a council employee. A bath attendant instead of a cemetery attendant. Swimming pool instead of graveyard. Surrounded every day by noisy people full of health instead of dead people who make no noise at all. Except one. He didn't so much make a noise as cause a lot of noise and disturbance and got me the sack. Although I'm not really complaining. To be honest, I like this job better. After that Sunday, I prefer the living to the dead. I didn't always. Councillor Joseph of Arimathea got me this job. Nice man. Said it was the least he could do after helping me lose the last one. I'm not sure what he means. It wasn't his fault. I don't know whose fault it was, really, but not his. The grave was his own property. He could do what he liked with it. No regulations broken. Regulations. Doing the right things the right way. I believe in that. I've got no education. You don't need to be clever to work in a graveyard. But I know that things should be done right. It may be that I'm superstitious, but you don't bear a gallows body in a rich man's tomb. The hung are damned. It's written. In any case, the damned and the stoned and the crucified have their own graveyard. Next the quarry, pits as is right. You don't put them in newly built tombs with closing stones. It was bad enough, the graveyard being right next door to the crucifixion hill. People used to picnic on the graves or leave their children with me while they went to watch the executions. I didn't mind, I liked children, but the graveyard used to get very untidy and I like order. Things should be tidy and in their place. If Councillor Joseph's friend had stayed in his place, I think I'd still be working up there. Lucky the wife's not with me. She doesn't like jokes of that sort. In any case, she knew the councillor's friend, and even a marble tomb in the temple wouldn't have been good enough for him. Women, bless them. I spoke of the Sunday. The whole weekend was strange. What is it, about a year and a half? I remember it like yesterday. In some ways, the Friday was more frightening than the Sunday, 1,000 times more. It started normally. Nice morning. Cool, fresh, usual for spring. The usual one or two early morning people visiting graves. One of them told me there had been a lot of noise in the city during the night. At the palace, at the high priest's house, and at the praetorium where Governor Pilate lives. There was to be a crucifixion, he told me. 3, in fact. Very unexpected, that, on a Friday. And if I remember rightly, it was the first day of Passover too. Almost before he finished telling me, I saw the crowds coming up the hill. It was no more than 8 o'clock. 3 crosses being carried. I remember thinking, somebody's in a hurry to cross them off. Don't tell the wife I said that. I got on with my work. I don't hold with crucifixion or the people who go and watch. On crucifixion days I would plant flowers and look after the dwarf trees and bushes, most of which I put in. That day I was working on the councillor's tomb, a nice piece of work, cut into a natural rock outcrop up at the higher end of the cemetery, away from the crucifixion end. Luckily, I was lining the little trench which guides the closing stone with pebbles, so that when it rolls across on edge it doesn't sink in. Those closing stones can be very heavy. I've seen as many as 20 mourners needed to move one. End of the service, male relatives and friends to the stone. The wealthier the man, the bigger the stone. Councillor Joseph is very wealthy. I set pebbles and put in little plants. I occupied myself. From down the slope I could hear the crowd making mob noises. Nasty. It began to get terribly close and hot and silent. I didn't notice it at first, but I like birds and enjoy their song. And suddenly I was aware the birds had stopped. It was uncanny. Then I noticed the sky starting to change colour. It went red, like anger, then purple, then dark grey, then black. At noon, I was on my knees. As I got to my feet, I felt the ground move. I thought it was me, that I was fainting, and that it was my things growing back. It wasn't. The earth was moving, with awful, rumbling, grinding, crushing noises. I could hear people screaming and crying. I lay down and hid my head in my arms. No hero me. It went on, seemingly for hours. Then it stopped, and it began to get light again. It was about 3 o'clock. I was stiff. I got up and walked around the graveyard to see what damage had been done. At first I could see nothing at all. None of the upright headstones, which you'd think would be flat, were different in any way. Then I saw a very scary thing. One of the ordinary graves, with the headstone upright and tidy, looked as if it had burst open, as if the body had burst out and gone. It gave me a funny feeling. There were about 4 like that. The earth pushed violently up and thrown to either side, as though from inside. I decided that I would fill them in again in a day or 2. They scared me and went back to the councillor's tomb, which was the same as before. Everything was. Sunshine, breeze, birdsong, everything. When I got there, the councillor was waiting. I was surprised. He looked very white and strained. He told me to get the tomb ready and cleaned for someone who had just died. I will go and get permission from Governor Pilate, he said. When I looked puzzled, for a Jewish cemetery has nothing to do with the Romans, he said, "It's one of the 3 men just crucified," and walked away looking very choked up. Well, I thought, none of my business, and I got busy. Most unusual. As I said, there are pits. That cemetery is rather a smart one. Title people, upper income groups, old families, family tombs. Now, in a brand new, cut from the solid rock, rich man's vault, with a huge closing stone, we were to put to rest a felon, a convicted and executed lawbreaker. I was quite put out by it. The body was brought in the late afternoon by some of the councillor's servants, who told us to come back a bit later to help move the stone across. I looked around for the embalmers, but the councillor told me that he and a friend called Nicodemus, I know him, his parents are buried here, would prepare the body themselves. They did it well too. I've seen the best, no expense spared, the finest linen, the purest myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds of it, fit for a king. We laid the body in, said the prayers and called the servants back. With the councillor and Nicodemus, it took 14 of us to put the stone in place. The next day, the Sabbath, another surprise. A lot of coming and going of the high priest's people and the temple authorities, and a lot of instructions, all in a "my man" tone, as the wife calls it. You must be very watchful for any suspicious characters near the tomb, my man. The stone is not to be touched in any way, my man. We will be sealing the tomb, my man, and mounting a guard, my man. A guard? For a dead felon? They meant it to. Potter's clay sealing and 10 men with 2 officers. Well, I did my day's work. I was watchful and went home, leaving the soldiers to it. The only suspicious characters seen had been some very sad-looking women, probably relations. When I got to the cemetery the next morning, I don't hurry on Sundays, The place near the tomb had to be seen to be believed. All the soldiers either asleep or just sitting as though in shock. The stone pushed right back and the tomb empty. Well, I can't tell you the commotion that went on that day and the stories that started to fly around. My day ended with the sniffiest of the burial committee sending for me and telling me that the cemetery was to be closed till further notice, that my watchfulness left a lot to be desired, that great confusion and disturbance existed, for which as custodian I had partly to accept responsibility, and because of all these factors, etc., and so on, I was sacked. I wasn't too upset, neither was the wife, especially as the councillor fixed me this new job almost the same week. Anyway, the wife thinks a swimming pool's got more class than a cemetery, certainly more cheerful, and I never had to fill in those graves. Good thing too, seemingly, for a lot of folk swear that the people who were in them have been seen around the city. Peculiar, the whole business. It was in my mind to ask the councillor how he felt about the tomb being interfered with and his friend's body disappearing and all that expensive embalming and stuff being wasted, but I didn't. He didn't seem too upset. In fact, he seemed happier than for a long time.